Marcus held
Another
the
one of
radio
these
like
old
it might
relics?
disintegrate at any moment.
Wait, what's this inside?
Dust fell from the dials onto the workbench.
This might be
in
more than
small
just
clouds.
dust.
The vacuum tubes were clouded with decades of age. The frequency display was cracked straight down the middle. "This thing's ancient," Marcus said, turning it over in his hands. "Probably hasn't worked since the 70s. I can give you maybe $40 for the parts. That's being generous." The old man didn't react. He just stood there with his hands buried in his jacket pockets. Calm, too calm, like someone who had all the time in the world. "Check the card first," he said quietly. Marcus looked up from the radio. "What card?" "Inside the battery compartment. There's a card. You'll want to see it before you make your offer." Marcus smirked. He'd been buying and selling ham radios since he was 14 years old. He knew junk when he saw it, but he grabbed a screwdriver from the workbench anyway, just to humor the guy. He popped open the back panel with practiced efficiency. A yellowed index card fell out onto the counter. The card was covered in handwriting, neat columns of numbers, frequencies listed in ascending order. Marcus picked it up, turned it over, examined it closely. The numbers didn't match any civilian band he recognized. He pulled out his phone, opened his frequency database, started cross-referencing. His thumb stopped scrolling halfway down the screen. These weren't ham frequencies. These weren't commercial broadcast bands. These weren't even modern military allocations. These were something else entirely. "Where did you get this?" Marcus asked. His voice had changed completely, less casual, more careful. The old man's expression hadn't changed at all. "That card will answer questions you didn't know to ask, because those frequencies were never supposed to be written down, and the man who used them was never supposed to exist." Marcus stared at him, really looked at him this time. Not just a customer, not just an old man trying to sell junk. He noticed details he'd missed before. The way the man stood with his weight balanced perfectly on both feet. The way he watched the door without seeming to watch it. The way his eyes tracked movement outside the shop window with mechanical precision, assessing every car, every pedestrian, every potential threat. "Who are you?" Marcus asked. "You can check the frequencies first," the old man said quietly. "Then decide if you want to know." Morning had broken over Portland, Oregon at exactly 6:47 in the morning. The gray sky pressed down on the city like a wet blanket, heavy with moisture that hadn't quite decided to become rain yet. Inside Cascade Electronics Repair, the overhead fluorescent lights had buzzed to life at precisely 6:30, 17 minutes before the hand-painted sign on the door would flip from closed to open. Marcus Webb moved through his shop with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed the same routine 891 consecutive days without
Graves,
variation.
do you copy?
He was 28
Over.
years old, with a wiry build that came from a diet consisting mostly of coffee and whatever food required the least amount of preparation. He wore his grandfather's Navy-issue watch on his left wrist, even though the second hand had stopped working sometime in 2019. He kept meaning to fix it. He never did. The shop smelled like solder flux and old circuit boards and the specific chemical tang of compressed air from a can. 3 workbenches lined the left wall, each one covered with dismantled electronics in various states of repair or cannibalization. There was an oscilloscope that had seen better days, 2 signal generators sitting side by side, a spectrum analyzer Marcus had bought at an estate sale for $200 that would have cost $8,000 new if he'd bought it from a manufacturer. The back wall held his pride and joy, his collection. Vintage radios, 73 units arranged meticulously by decade and manufacturer. Zenith transoceanic radios from the 1950s, their leather cases cracked with age. Hallicrafters SX-28 receivers from World War II. Heavy metal chassis that had probably intercepted enemy communications. A Collins 75A4 that had likely listened to Soviet transmissions during the Cold War, its dials worn smooth from thousands of hours of operation. Some of them still worked, most of them didn't. Marcus didn't particularly care either way. He liked the aesthetic, the craftsmanship, the way they represented an era when things were built to last forever and designed to be understood by the people who used them. He poured coffee from the pot he had started before unlocking the back door. Black, no sugar, no cream. Drank it while standing at the front counter, scrolling through overnight messages on the shop's email account. 2 repair requests for broken amplifiers. 1 person asking if he bought broken laptops in bulk. 1 spam message about extending his car warranty, which was particularly ironic because Marcus didn't even own a car. He deleted the spam without reading it. Responded to the repair requests with his standard template, professional and polite. Opened the drawer beneath the cash register. Inside sat a Motorola handheld scanner, programmed with every public safety frequency in the Portland metropolitan area, police dispatch, fire department, emergency medical services, airport operations, marine band communications from the river. Marcus turned it on with a familiar click. Let it cycle through channels automatically. Background noise, white noise, the sound of a city functioning normally. It helped him think. It filled the silence. At 7:15 in the morning, Marcus walked to the back corner of the shop, where a locked steel cabinet stood against the wall. Gray industrial paint, chipped at the corners from decades of use and abuse. A heavy combination lock hung from the latch, the kind that would require bolt cutters to defeat. The label across the front read, "Estate Archive, Do Not Open," in Marcus's own handwriting, written with a black permanent marker 3 years ago. He had written that label when he inherited the shop and everything in it from his uncle. The uncle who had died suddenly at 54 years old. Massive heart attack. No warning signs, no family history of cardiac problems anyone knew about. One day, he was running the shop, joking with customers, fixing radios like he'd done for 30 years. The next day, he was gone. Just like that. Marcus spun the combination lock with practiced movements, 14-27-33. The numbers were random, meaningless, or at least he thought they were. The lock clicked open with a satisfying mechanical sound. He pulled the heavy door open. Inside were items his uncle had kept locked away, but never explained to anyone. A leather-bound logbook, filled with entries written in some kind of shorthand Marcus couldn't decipher, even after 3 years of trying to make sense of it. A cardboard box containing old vacuum tubes with military designation codes stamped into the glass in tiny letters. Photographs of men in uniform standing beside radio equipment Marcus didn't recognize, equipment that looked far too sophisticated for the era the photograph suggested. And a letter, sealed in an envelope, addressed to nobody in particular. Signed by his uncle in handwriting Marcus would recognize anywhere, even in his sleep. Marcus had read the letter once, the day after the funeral, alone in the shop, trying to make sense of what had happened. He had never opened it again since that day, never shown it to anyone. The letter said things that didn't make sense, references to operations that had no official names, coordinates that, when Marcus looked them up on maps, led to empty jungle or abandoned buildings in countries his uncle had never mentioned visiting. Instructions to keep certain things locked away until someone came asking the right questions, until someone who knew came looking. Marcus closed the cabinet door, locked it again, walked back to the front counter. The scanner cycled through frequencies with familiar rhythm, static, voices reporting incidents, more static. The familiar rhythm of public safety communications in a working city. At 7:43, the first customer of the day arrived. A college student with a broken phone charger and a stressed expression that suggested finals week was destroying him. Marcus replaced the charger in exactly 4 minutes, charged him $12. The kid left happy, immediate crisis averted, one less thing to worry about. At 8:30, an older woman brought in a vintage turntable that had belonged to her mother who'd passed away 2 months ago. The motor was completely burned out, seized from years of sitting unused in an attic. Marcus told her honestly that it would take at least a week to source the replacement part, maybe longer if he had to order from overseas suppliers. She said that was fine. She'd waited 40 years to inherit it. Another week wouldn't kill her. She left the turntable on the counter, wrapped carefully in an old quilted blanket that probably had its own history. At 9 in the morning, Marcus was halfway through repairing a guitar amplifier for a local musician when he heard something unusual. The scanner had stopped cycling. It had locked onto a single frequency and was holding there, not moving to the next channel, not scanning, just sitting on one frequency, frozen. A voice came through the small speaker, clear, calm, professional, speaking in what sounded like some kind of coded language that Marcus didn't quite understand but recognized as official communications. Delta 7 confirming frequency sweep, no contact established, proceeding to next checkpoint. Marcus looked up from the amplifier he was working on, stared at the scanner sitting on the counter. That wasn't a public safety channel. That wasn't amateur radio traffic. That wasn't commercial broadcast. That wasn't anything that should be on the frequencies he had programmed into the scanner. That was something else entirely. Something that didn't belong. He grabbed a notepad from beside the register, wrote down the frequency displayed on the scanner's small LCD screen. 7.344 MHz, upper HF band, high frequency. Not allocated for civilian use in any database he'd ever seen. Not standard military communications either, at least not anything modern. He waited, listened carefully. The voice didn't return. After 30 seconds of silence, the scanner resumed its normal cycling pattern, moving through the programmed frequencies like nothing unusual had happened at all. Marcus stared at the number he'd written down, felt something cold and unfamiliar move through his chest. A sensation he couldn't quite name. Not fear exactly, more like recognition, like his subconscious mind knew something his conscious mind hadn't quite caught up to yet. He walked to the locked cabinet, unlocked it again with the same combination, pulled out his uncle's logbook, started flipping through pages of shorthand and numbers and coded entries that had never made sense to him, no matter how many times he'd tried to decode them. Found an entry dated April 17th, 1979, more than 40 years ago. A frequency was listed in the margin, circled twice in red ink that had faded to orange with age. 7.344 MHz, the exact same frequency the scanner had just picked up. Beside it, 2 words written in his uncle's precise, careful handwriting. Ghost Net. Marcus set the logbook down on the counter carefully. His hands were shaking slightly. He didn't understand what he was looking at. Didn't understand what it meant. Didn't understand the connection between a transmission he'd just heard and a note his uncle had written 40 years ago. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that it meant something important. Something his uncle had wanted him to find eventually. Something someone else might not want him to know about. At 10:15 in the morning, the bell above the shop door chimed. Marcus looked up from the guitar amplifier he was still pretending to work on. He saw an elderly man step inside. The man moved slowly, but not with the kind of frailty that comes from age and weakness. He moved with deliberation, with purpose, like someone who had learned over many decades to conserve energy and make every movement count for something. He wore a faded canvas jacket that looked like it had survived multiple wars and countless seasons. Blue jeans worn soft at the knees from years of use and washing. Work boots caked with dried reddish mud that suggested recent outdoor activity. His hair was gray, cut in a military-style buzz cut that suggested old habits die hard, even decades after service ends. His face was deeply lined but not soft, sharp cheekbones that looked like they could cut glass, eyes that were pale blue, almost colorless in the harsh overhead fluorescent light of the shop. He carried something wrapped in a green canvas bag, army surplus style. The kind of bag that had probably held ammunition or emergency rations or radio equipment at some point in its long service life. Marcus barely glanced at him at first. Just another customer. Just another person bringing in another piece of electronic junk they hoped was worth something or could be fixed for cheap. He returned his attention to the amplifier, adjusting a connection that had come loose, pretending to be absorbed in the work. The man walked directly to the counter with measured steps. Set the bag down with both hands carefully, like it contained something that mattered. Didn't say anything, didn't ask for help or announce his presence. Just stood there, waiting with that same infinite patience that suggested military training or intelligence work. Marcus looked up after 10 seconds of uncomfortable silence. "Can I help you find something?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he unzipped the canvas bag with slow, deliberate movements. reached inside, pulled out a radio, vintage Yaesu FT-101, late 1970s model, high-frequency transceiver used by both military communications units and amateur radio operators during the Cold War era. The radio looked like it had been through absolute hell. Dust was caked into every crevice and ventilation slot. The dials were tarnished almost black with oxidation. The frequency display was cracked straight across the middle. The metal chassis showed deep corrosion around the mounting screws, the kind of oxidation that comes from years of exposure to moisture and salt air. Marcus picked it up with both hands, felt the substantial weight of it, heavier than modern radios. Turned it over, examining the construction and components. "This thing's ancient," he said, keeping his tone professional but brutally honest. "Probably hasn't worked since the 70s, maybe early 80s at the latest. I can give you maybe $40 for the parts if you're lucky. That's being generous, honestly. The chassis alone might be salvageable if I can get the corrosion off." The old man's expression didn't change, not a flicker of disappointment or surprise or anger. He just stood there, watching Marcus with those pale, colorless eyes. "Check the card first," he said quietly. Marcus set the radio down on the wooden counter. "What card are you talking about?" "Inside the battery compartment," the old man explained. His voice was calm, measured, like someone who had spent a lifetime choosing his words carefully, and speaking only when absolutely necessary. "There's a card inside. You'll want to see it before you make your final offer." Marcus had heard variations of this exact line probably 100 times over the years he'd been running the shop. People always thought their junk was worth more than it actually was. Some hidden treasure that nobody else could see or recognize. A rare component worth thousands, a valuable serial number, a connection to some famous person or historical event that made it priceless. He sighed, already knowing this would be a waste of time. Grabbed a screwdriver from the workbench drawer. "Sure thing. Let's take a look at this mysterious card." He popped the back panel off the radio with practiced efficiency. The screws were badly corroded, fighting him slightly, but they came free eventually with some applied force. The panel clattered onto the counter with a hollow metallic sound. An index card fell out from inside the battery compartment, landed face up on the scratched wooden surface of the counter. The card was yellowed with age, the kind of deep discoloration that only comes from decades of existence. The edges were soft, worn down from repeated handling over many years. It was covered in handwriting, neat columns of numbers written in faded blue ink that had been bright once, but had faded to a lighter shade over time. Marcus picked it up carefully, looked at it closely under the overhead light. Frequencies, dozens of them, listed in ascending order, organized with almost military precision. Each frequency was followed by a 2-letter code written in smaller script beside it. DL, TC, NR, FS. Abbreviations he didn't recognize. He pulled out his smartphone from his pocket, opened the frequency allocation database application he used for repair work and component identification. Started checking the numbers listed on the card against known civilian and military frequency bands. The first frequency he checked was 3.8847 MHz. He entered it carefully into the database search function, waited for results to load. Nothing. Not a ham band, not a commercial broadcast frequency, not a standard military allocation according to any declassified records. He tried the next one. 5.1123 MHz. Same result. No match in the civilian database. No match in the declassified military frequency lists he had access to through his subscription services. He checked 5 more frequencies at random from different parts of the card. None of them matched anything in any database he could find. It was like they didn't officially exist in any registry, like someone had simply made them up out of thin air. Except that didn't make any sense. You don't just invent radio frequencies. They have to be allocated by international telecommunications authorities, registered with governments, recorded somewhere in official documentation. Marcus looked up slowly at the old man. The man was watching him with that same perfectly neutral expression. No smile, no tension in his weathered face or shoulders, just waiting, patient as stone, patient as someone who had waited decades for something and could wait a few more minutes. "Where did you get this?" Marcus asked. His voice had changed completely. The casual professional shopkeeper tone was gone, replaced by something more careful, more cautious, more aware that something unusual was happening. "That card will answer questions you didn't know to ask," the old man said quietly. "Because those frequencies were never supposed to be written down by anyone, and the man who used them was never supposed to exist in any official record." Marcus stared at him, really looked at him this time, not just seeing an old man in a canvas jacket, not just seeing another customer trying to sell electronic junk for more than it was worth. He noticed things he'd missed on first glance. The way the man stood with his weight distributed perfectly on both feet, balanced like a trained fighter. The way he watched the shop door without seeming to watch it, peripheral vision tracking everyone who walked past the front window. The way his eyes moved in systematic patterns, scanning the entire room with mechanical precision, assessing potential threats and available exits. When a car backfired loudly outside on the street, the old man's head turned toward the sound instantly. Not startled, not jumping or flinching, just turning smoothly, locating the source of the noise, identifying it as harmless, dismissing it as irrelevant, all in less than a second. Then his eyes returned to Marcus like nothing had happened at all. The language he'd used, frequencies, never supposed to be written down, never supposed to exist. That was operational security terminology. That was the kind of language you learned in intelligence training programs, in classified briefings held in windowless rooms, in places where words carried serious consequences. "Who are you?" Marcus asked directly. "You can check the frequencies first," the old man said. His voice remained quiet, calm, completely controlled. "Then decide if you want to know the answer to that question." Marcus looked down at the frequency card in his hands, then at the radio sitting on the counter, then back at the old man standing perfectly still in his shop. He felt like he was standing at the edge of something, a decision point, a moment where everything could change depending on what he chose to do next. He walked to the back office without saying anything. The small room was more of a closet with a desk crammed into it. Metal shelves lined the walls, packed tight with reference manuals and frequency guides and 3-ring binders full of technical documentation he'd accumulated over years. He pulled down a thick volume from the second shelf, Military Radio Communications History, 1960-1990, red cover, edges worn from repeated use, published by a defense contractor that had done communication systems for the government. Marcus had bought it at a surplus auction for $15, thinking it might come in useful someday for identifying old equipment. He flipped through pages rapidly, looking for the section on classified frequency allocations. Found it, scanned rows of dense technical text. Near the bottom of page 284, a footnote appeared in small print that was easy to miss. Frequencies in the 3.8 MHz range with 2-letter operational codes were reserved for SIGINT cross-border relay stations during the Cold War era. Records sealed indefinitely under National Security Directive 63. Contact NSA Historical Division for declassification requests. No estimated timeline for public release. Marcus read it 3 times to make sure he understood what he was seeing. SIGINT, Signals Intelligence, Cross-Border Relay Stations, Cold War Operations, National Security Directive, NSA. He returned to the front counter with the book still open in his hands. The old man hadn't moved a single inch, still standing in the exact same position. Hands resting at his sides now, watching Marcus with those pale eyes that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. "These are SIGINT frequencies," Marcus said. "Not a question, a statement of fact." "They were," the old man confirmed. "Past tense, officially anyway." "Who used them?" "People who didn't exist in any official records," the old man said carefully. "Operating communication relay stations that weren't on any maps, relaying intelligence signals from places we weren't officially supposed to be operating, places the government couldn't officially acknowledge." Marcus felt his pulse pounding in his temples. "And you're saying you were one of these people?" "I was one of them," the old man said simply, Call sign switchboard 9, 1974 to 1982, Southeast Asia, Central America, Eastern Europe, wherever the signals needed routing and nobody could know who was doing it. But you're supposed to be— Marcus stopped himself mid-sentence. The old man finished it for him. Dead. Officially dead. Training accident in July 1982. That's what the file says if anyone bothers to look. That's what it's supposed to say. That's what they told everyone who might have known me. Every molecule of air in the small shop had become heavy, thick, hard to breathe. Marcus couldn't move, couldn't think clearly. His eyes went from the frequency card to the radio sitting on the counter to the old man standing perfectly still like a photograph that had somehow come to life. "Why are you here?" Marcus asked. "Why are you telling me this? Why bring this to my shop specifically?" The old man's expression shifted slightly, not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement of a good question. "Because someone activated one of those frequencies this morning at 9:03 a.m. First time in 42 years, and I needed to know if it was an accident or if it was intentional." Marcus felt ice water flooding through his veins. "How could you possibly know that someone—" "Because I've been monitoring those frequencies," the old man interrupted quietly. "Every single day since 1982, waiting to see if the network ever came back online, waiting to see if someone remembered. This morning at exactly 9:03, frequency 7.344 MHz, transmitted a coded check-in message. That specific frequency belonged to a station I used to relay traffic for during active operations. Station Delta 7. Operated out of Thailand until the network shut down in 1981. Marcus's mind went completely blank except for one thought. The scanner. 9 Noir this morning. The voice he'd heard. Delta 7 confirming frequency sweep. He looked at the old man standing in his shop. The old man looked back with those colorless eyes. "You heard it," the old man said. "Not a question, a statement. On your scanner that's sitting on the counter right now." Marcus nodded slowly, unable to speak. "I wrote it down," Marcus finally managed to say. "I checked my uncle's logbook. He had the exact same frequency listed, 1979, next to the words, GhostNet." The old man's weathered face changed. Subtle, but definitely changed. Recognition, maybe respect, maybe something else entirely. "Your uncle," he said carefully. "What was his full name?" "Richard Webb. He ran this shop for 30 years, died 3 years ago. Sudden heart attack." "Richard Webb," the old man repeated slowly, quietly, like testing the weight of the name in his mouth. "He was part of the network, civilian contractor, maintained radio equipment for off-book operations that couldn't go through normal military supply channels. He knew things, kept records, documentation, things he wasn't officially supposed to keep." Marcus felt like the floor had opened beneath his feet. "What kind of things?" "Proof," the old man said simply. "Evidence that the network existed when officially it never did. Documentation. Your uncle was careful, methodical. He knew that someday someone might start asking the right questions. He made sure the answers would survive even if he didn't." The old man reached slowly into his canvas jacket, pulled out an envelope. Yellow with age, sealed with tape that had turned brown. Marcus's uncle's handwriting on the front in black ink. "To whoever runs the shop after me." The old man set it on the counter carefully between them. "Your uncle gave me this in 1983. Told me that if the GhostNet network ever reactivated, I should bring it to whoever was running this shop. Said they'd know what to do with it. Said they'd understand what it meant." Marcus picked up the envelope with shaking hands. The paper felt fragile, like it might dissolve under too much pressure, like it might crumble into dust if he wasn't careful. "What's in it?" he asked. "The truth," the old man said. "Or as much of the truth as could be safely written down. Station locations, operator call signs, frequency schedules, mission logs from operations that never officially happened, names of people who officially don't exist, things that prove what we did, things that prove we existed and served." Marcus set the envelope down, looked at the old radio, at the frequency card with its columns of impossible numbers. at the old man standing in his shop like a ghost made suddenly solid and real. "This is absolutely insane," Marcus said. "It's real," the old man corrected him. "There's a significant difference between insane and real." The scanner on the counter suddenly locked onto a frequency again, stopped cycling, held on one channel. A voice came through the small speaker, different from before, female this time, calm, professional, speaking in the same kind of coded language. "Switchboard 9, this is Overwatch 3. Confirm your current status immediately." The old man's hand moved smoothly to his jacket pocket, pulled out a small handheld radio, modern, digital, commercial model you could buy at any electronics store. He keyed the microphone button. "Overwatch 3, this is Switchboard 9, status green, standing by for instructions." The female voice responded immediately. "Acknowledged, Switchboard 9. Maintain monitoring posture. Command wants confirmation before proceeding with next phase." "Copy that. Standing by." The old man released the microphone button, looked at Marcus. "They know I'm here right now." "Who's they?" Marcus asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. "The people who remember," the old man said. "The ones who operated the GhostNet network. We're old now. Most of us are dead. Natural causes, mostly. But some of us are still around, still watching, still listening, because we always knew this might happen someday." "What might happen?" "Reactivation," the old man said. "Someone found the old frequencies. Someone has the original equipment, or built new equipment to the old specifications. Someone is actively trying to bring GhostNet back online after 40 years of silence." Marcus felt like he was falling through empty space. Why would anyone do that? "That's exactly what we need to find out." The bell above the shop door chimed loudly. Marcus looked up with a start. Two people entered the shop, mid-40s, athletic builds that suggested regular physical training, wearing civilian clothes that somehow screamed federal agent to anyone who knew what to look for. Wrong shoes for civilians, wrong watches for normal people. Wrong way of scanning a room upon entry. The first one smiled pleasantly. Professional. "Good morning. We're looking for someone who might have logged unusual radio traffic this morning. HF band, non-standard frequencies not allocated for civilian use." Marcus couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. The second agent's eyes landed immediately on the vintage radio sitting on the counter, on the frequency card lying beside it, on the old man standing perfectly still on the other side of the counter. The agent's expression flickered for just a fraction of a second. Recognition. Then careful, practiced neutrality. "That's some interesting equipment you have there," the second agent said. "Mind if I ask where it came from?" The old man turned slowly, deliberately, faced the two agents with the posture of someone who had done this exact thing before, many times, in many places. "You can ask whatever you want," he said calmly, "but you already know the answer to that question." The first agent's pleasant smile faded completely. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us voluntarily. This is a matter of national security. We can do this the easy way." "No," the old man said, quiet, absolute, final. "You're not taking me anywhere." The second agent's hand moved instinctively toward his hip, stopped halfway, froze. The old man hadn't moved, hadn't reached for anything, hadn't made any threatening gesture. But something in his eyes, in his posture, in the way he stood, made the agent reconsider the wisdom of that action. "We can do this easy, or we can do this hard," the second agent said. "Your choice entirely." "You can do it honestly," the old man replied. "Tell him who you really work for. Tell him why you're really here. Tell him what actually happens to civilian citizens who find frequencies they're not supposed to know about." The first agent looked at Marcus. "Sir, you need to step away from the counter right now. This doesn't concern you." "It does now," the old man said firmly. "He heard the transmission. He has his uncle's documentation. He's part of this whether you like it or not. Whether any of us like it or not." The second agent pulled out his phone, stepped toward the back of the shop for privacy, spoke quietly into it. Marcus caught fragments of the conversation. Confirmed. Switchboard 9. Civilian witness. Yes, sir. The shop owner. Understood. Wait for further orders. The agent returned. His expression had changed noticeably. Less aggressive, more careful, more uncertain. What's your official designation? He asked the old man. Switchboard 9, SIGINT Relay Operator, 1974 to 1982. GhostNet Western Communications Sector. The agent stared at him for a long moment. You're supposed to be dead. Your file says you died in 1982. I was dead, the old man agreed, for 42 years. Convenient for everyone involved, until someone started using my old frequencies again. The first agent found his voice. We need to bring you in. Standard debriefing. Identity verification. Security protocol requires it. No, the old man said again. I've been debriefed. I've been verified. I've been told to disappear and stay disappeared. I did exactly that for 4 decades. Now someone's bringing the network back online, and you want me to disappear again? Not happening this time. The second agent looked at Marcus. You have documentation related to this network? Marcus glanced at the old man. The old man gave a small nod. Permission granted. My uncle kept records, Marcus said. Equipment maintenance logs, frequency schedules, repair reports for off-book operations. He was a civilian contractor for GhostNet. The agent's face went noticeably pale. Where are these records located? Locked up, in a safe place. We're going to need access to them. No, the old man said for the 3rd time. You need to explain what's actually happening. You need to tell us who reactivated the network and why. You need to stop treating this like a cleanup operation and start treating it like what it actually is. And what exactly is it? The first agent asked. A message, the old man said. Someone sending a very specific message. Someone who knows the old frequencies, knows the protocols, knows how to operate on channels that have been dead silent for 40 years. That's not random chance. That's not an accident. That's completely intentional. The second agent's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, looked at the screen. His expression shifted noticeably. We're authorized to bring you both in for voluntary cooperation. Full immunity from prosecution. But it's not optional. You're both coming with us. The old man smiled thinly. No warmth, no humor. There it is. The honest version finally. Threats wrapped up in polite courtesy. It's not a threat, the agent said. It's absolute necessity. You've both been exposed to highly classified information. You've both confirmed knowledge of sealed operations. We can't just let you walk away. Watch me, the old man said. He picked up the radio carefully, picked up the frequency card, turned toward the door with deliberate movements. The second agent moved to physically block his path. Sir, I can't allow you to leave with that equipment. Then arrest me, the old man said calmly. Do it publicly, on the record. Explain to a federal judge why you're arresting a legally dead man for possessing a radio from an operation that officially never happened. The agent hesitated. Uncertainty crossed his face. The old man stepped smoothly around him, walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the handle, looked back at Marcus. You have a choice right now. Come with me and learn the actual truth. Or stay here and let them bury it all again like they've done before. Either way, this doesn't end quietly. Marcus looked at the 2 federal agents, at the old man, at the envelope on the counter with his uncle's handwriting on it, at the locked cabinet in the corner that suddenly seemed incredibly important. He grabbed the envelope, walked around the counter, stood beside the old man. I'm coming with you, Marcus said. The agents didn't move, didn't try to stop them, just watched silently as Marcus and the old man walked out of the shop together into the gray Portland morning. Outside, the overcast sky pressed down heavily. Rain threatened but hadn't started falling yet. The old man walked to a weathered pickup truck parked 3 spaces down the street, opened the passenger door. Marcus climbed in without hesitation. The interior smelled like coffee and old canvas, and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify. Gun oil, maybe. Or cleaning solvent. The old man got behind the wheel, started the engine. It turned over smoothly despite the truck's age. Where are we going? Marcus asked. Somewhere they can't follow without making a lot of noise, the old man said. Somewhere your uncle set up as a safe house 40 years ago for exactly this kind of situation. Somewhere the truth has been waiting. He pulled out of the parking space carefully, drove down the street at normal speed, obeying all traffic laws. In the rearview mirror, Marcus saw the 2 federal agents standing outside his shop. Watching. Not pursuing. Not yet. Just watching and probably making phone calls. "What's your real name?" Marcus asked. The old man was quiet for a long moment. "You can call me Graves," he finally said. "Is that your actual name?" "It's what people called me before I stopped existing officially. Before I became dead. It's close enough." They drove in silence for 10 minutes, through downtown Portland, across the steel bridge over the Willamette River, into the industrial district where warehouses and rail yards dominated the landscape. Everything gray and utilitarian. Graves pulled into a narrow alley behind a corrugated metal building, parked, shut off the engine, got out without explaining. Marcus followed him silently. The building looked completely abandoned from the outside. Graffiti covered the lower walls. Windows were boarded up with plywood. No signs of any occupancy. No cars. No lights. Nothing. Graves walked to a side door that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Pulled a key from his pocket. A real physical key, not electronic. Unlocked the door with a solid mechanical click. Inside was complete darkness. Then Graves found a light switch. Fluorescent fixtures flickered uncertainly, then buzzed to life. The space wasn't abandoned at all. It was a fully functional workshop. Shelves lined with radio equipment, everything organized by type and era. Workbenches covered with electronics in various states of assembly. A wall of filing cabinets, metal, gray, institutional. A desk with 3 large computer monitors, all powered off. And in the center of the room, a massive radio console. Military-grade equipment, multiple transceivers, frequency synthesizers, encryption modules, signal processors, equipment that looked like it belonged in a government communications facility, not a warehouse in Portland. "What is this place?" Marcus asked in awe. "Your uncle's insurance policy," Graves said. "He maintained it for 30 years. When he died suddenly, I took over, kept it running, kept it hidden, waiting for the day someone might actually need it." Graves walked to the large radio console, powered it on with a series of switches. The equipment hummed to life with a deep electronic sound. Displays glowed green and amber. Analog meters jumped and settled. He tuned one of the transceivers carefully to 7.344 MHz, the exact frequency from this morning, static at first. Then a voice, same female voice from before in Marcus's shop. "All stations, this is Overwatch 3, network check, sound off by designation immediately." A pause. Then responses began coming in. Male voices, female voices, different accents. Call signs Marcus didn't recognize, but Graves obviously did. "Lighthouse 6, status green. Archive 2, status green. Compass 11, status green. Delta 7, status green." Graves keyed the microphone on the console. "Switchboard 9, status green," the female voice responded. "Acknowledged, Switchboard 9. Stand by for command transmission." Graves released the microphone, looked at Marcus. "There are 17 of us left. 17 operators who survived GhostNet operations. Most of us have been in hiding for 40 years under new identities, erased from official records, new lives, new names, told never to make contact with each other, never to acknowledge what we did or who we were." "Why now?" Marcus asked. "Why reactivate after all this time?" "Because someone found the master frequency list," Graves said grimly. "Someone gained access to documentation that was supposed to be completely destroyed, and they're using our exact call signs, our protocols, our encryption, trying to lure us out of hiding. Who would do that?" "That's exactly what we're trying to determine right now." The radio crackled with static. The female voice returned. "All stations, command has authorized full disclosure. The individual attempting to reactivate GhostNet has been positively identified. Designation, architect." Complete silence on the network. Heavy. Oppressive. Graves's weathered face had gone absolutely white. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Architect is dead. I watched him die myself." The voice continued calmly. Architect's last known transmission was October 1982. Location, Eastern Europe. Status, killed in action during network shutdown. However, recent signals intelligence indicates someone using Architect's original encryption keys and authentication codes has been transmitting on GhostNet frequencies for the past 6 weeks. Graves sat down heavily in a chair. His hands were shaking visibly. "He's alive, after all these years." "Who's Architect?" Marcus asked urgently. "The man who ran the entire GhostNet," Graves said quietly. "The man who recruited all of us, trained us, gave us our call signs and missions. He was the network. Without him, we were just scattered operators with radios. He made us into an actual functional unit. And if he's really alive after all this time, then everything we've been told for 40 years is a complete lie." The radio crackled again. Different voice this time, male, older, deep, authority in every carefully chosen word. "All stations, this is Architect. I'm going to make this very simple for everyone. You were told I was dead because that's what I needed you to believe at the time. You were told to disappear completely because that's what kept you alive. But circumstances have changed dramatically. The people who wanted GhostNet buried permanently are dying of old age. The secrets they protected are dying with them. It's time to bring the truth into the light finally." Graves leaned forward urgently, keyed the microphone. "Architect, this is Switchboard 9. Authenticate your identity immediately." The voice responded without hesitation. "Authentication code, Red Sky November. Your training class graduated March 1974. Your first operational assignment was Relay Station Charlie in northern Thailand. You broke your wrist during escape and evasion training. I drove you to the hospital myself in a jeep." Graves closed his eyes. "It's really him." "Switchboard 9, Architect continued. "I need you to bring the civilian to the meeting point. He has documentation we need desperately. His uncle was one of us, one of the good ones. The civilian has a right to know what his uncle died protecting." Marcus felt cold spreading through his body. "My uncle died of a heart attack, natural causes." Graves looked at him with an expression Marcus couldn't read. "Did he, though? What does that mean?" "It means your uncle knew too much," Graves said carefully. "It means people who wanted GhostNet buried permanently might have decided he was becoming a liability. It means his death might not have been as natural as the doctors claimed." Marcus couldn't breathe. "You're saying they murdered him?" "I'm saying it's entirely possible," Graves said. "Your uncle kept detailed records, maintained equipment, he knew operator identities. He could have exposed the entire network if he'd wanted to. That made him extremely dangerous to certain people." The radio crackled. Architect's voice again. "Meeting point is the original training facility. Coordinates in your secure packet. 48 hours from now. Come prepared to testify publicly. We're going public with everything." The transmission ended abruptly. Static returned. Graves powered down the radio console slowly, stood up, walked to one of the filing cabinets, pulled out a thick folder, handed it to Marcus. "Your uncle's complete records," Graves said. "Everything he documented about GhostNet over 30 years, station locations, operator names and call signs, mission logs, frequency schedules, technical specifications. He kept absolutely everything." Marcus opened the folder with trembling hands, saw pages and pages of handwritten notes in his uncle's familiar handwriting, photographs of radio equipment, maps with coordinates marked in red, detailed schematics of communication systems, technical diagrams, and a letter, his uncle's handwriting, addressed directly to him. Marcus's hands shook as he read it. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. Either I died naturally or someone decided I knew too much. Either way, you need to understand what I was part of. GhostNet wasn't just intelligence gathering, it was power, real power, control, the ability to move information invisibly across international borders, to coordinate operations nobody could trace, to make things happen without leaving any fingerprints. I was proud of that work for many years, but I also knew it made me expendable, disposable. So I documented absolutely everything. I created insurance. If they come for you, if they try to silence the truth, you have proof now, you have evidence, use it. Tell the story. Don't let them erase what we did. Don't let them erase who we were. Marcus set the letter down carefully, looked at Graves. He knew what might happen to him. He always knew, Graves said. We all did. We were ghosts. Ghosts don't get retirement parties and gold watches. They get erased. That's how it works. So what do we do now? We go to the meeting, Graves said. We hear what Architect has to say. We decide together if the truth is worth the cost. Marcus thought about his shop, his routine, his safe, predictable life that had just been completely shattered. And if I say no? Then you go back to your shop and pretend none of this ever happened, Graves said. And in a few weeks, maybe a few months, someone decides you're a loose end that needs tying up, and you disappear, just like your uncle probably did. Marcus looked at the folder in his hands, at the evidence his uncle had died protecting, at the truth that had been buried for 40 years. When do we leave? He asked. Graves smiled for the first time, small, genuine. Tonight. They spent the next 8 hours preparing carefully. Graves showed Marcus how to operate the radio equipment properly, how to authenticate transmissions, how to recognize encryption patterns, how to identify hostile signals, how to communicate securely. Marcus learned faster than he expected. Maybe it was in his blood somehow. His uncle's knowledge passed down through genetics and osmosis. Maybe it was pure survival instinct. Maybe both. At 8:00 p.m., they loaded equipment into Graves's truck. The portable radio, the frequency card, Marcus's uncle's complete documentation, a laptop with encrypted files, a portable antenna system. Graves also loaded something else, a weatherproof case, long, heavy, clearly containing weapons. He didn't open it to show Marcus. Marcus didn't ask what was inside. They drove south out of Portland, through suburbs that gradually thinned, into rural Oregon, where trees closed in on both sides of the highway. Darkness swallowed the landscape completely. After 2 hours of driving, Graves turned off onto a narrow Forest Service road, unpaved, barely maintained. The truck bounced violently over ruts and rocks. "Where exactly are we going?" Marcus asked, gripping the door handle. "GhostNet's original training facility," Graves said. "Officially, it was registered as a fire lookout station. Unofficially, it was where they taught us to become invisible." Another hour of rough driving deeper into the forest. Then Graves stopped, killed the lights completely. "We walk from here." They got out into the cold mountain air. Graves pulled gear from the truck bed, backpacks, radio equipment, the long weapon case, handed Marcus a heavy backpack, kept the case for himself. They hiked through darkness for 30 minutes. Graves moved with absolute confidence despite the lack of light, like he'd walked this exact path 1,000 times before. Maybe he had. A structure appeared gradually through the trees. Wooden building, 2 stories, windows dark, looked completely abandoned from a distance. But as they got closer, Marcus saw details that suggested otherwise. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt, recently cut firewood stacked beside the door, thin smoke rising from the chimney into the night sky. "Someone's already here," Marcus whispered. "All of us," Graves said. They approached the door. Graves knocked in a specific pattern, 3 times. Pause, 2 times. Pause, once. The door opened immediately. A woman stood there, 60-something. Gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, eyes that tracked movement exactly like Graves's did, eyes that had seen things, done things. "Switchboard 9, she said. "It's been a very long time." "Overwatch 3, Graves replied. "Good to see you still breathing." They went inside together. The interior was warm. A fire burned in a large stone fireplace. 15 people sat around the room in various chairs, all older, all 60 or 70-something, all watching Marcus and Graves with expressions that mixed curiosity and calculation and assessment. At the far end of the room a man stood, 70-something, tall, lean, military bearing even at his age, white hair cut very short, face deeply lined but hard, eyes pale gray. He looked at Graves, smiled slightly. Switchboard 9, right on time as always. Graves set down the equipment carefully, stood at something very close to military attention. "Architect, you look remarkably good for a dead man." "You too," Architect said. Then his gray eyes moved to Marcus. "And you must be Richard Webb's nephew. You look like him. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw, same expression." Marcus didn't know what to say. Architect gestured to an empty chair. "Sit, please, we have a great deal to discuss." "We have a great..." For the next 3 hours, Architect told the complete story of GhostNet, how it started in 1972 as an experimental communication network for covert operations, how it grew rapidly into the primary relay system for SIGINT across 4 continents, how it operated completely off-book, no congressional oversight, no official record, no paper trail, just operators with radios in places nobody officially acknowledged. He told them about successful missions, intelligence gathered that saved lives, operations coordinated that prevented disasters, information relayed that gave American forces critical advantages. He told them about the terrible cost, operators killed in the field, families lied to about what had happened, identities permanently erased, people who ceased to exist, and he told them exactly why it ended so suddenly in 1982. Someone in the intelligence community decided GhostNet had become too powerful, Architect said. Too independent, too uncontrollable. They initiated a shutdown protocol. All operators were to be extracted, debriefed thoroughly, and reassigned to new identities with no possibility of contact. No contact with each other ever. No acknowledgement of the network's existence. Complete and total erasure. "But you didn't comply," Graves said. "No," Architect agreed. "I faked my death instead. Went completely dark. Because I knew what they'd really planned. They weren't reassigning operators to new lives. They were systematically eliminating them, making absolutely sure nobody could ever talk about what we'd done." The room went completely silent. Over the next 5 years after shutdown, Architect continued, 12 GhostNet operators died, car accidents, heart attacks, apparent suicides. All plausible enough, all convenient timing. I watched it happen from hiding and couldn't stop it. Couldn't warn anyone without exposing myself and getting eliminated too. He looked directly at Marcus. "Your uncle was one of the smart ones. He documented absolutely everything, created insurance, made himself too dangerous to touch casually, but even that only bought him time in the end." Marcus felt sick. They really did kill him. "I don't know for absolute certain," Architect said honestly, "but I strongly suspect it. The timing was too perfect. He just contacted me secretly, said he wanted to go public with everything, said he had proof that couldn't be denied. 3 weeks later, he was dead." "Why now?" Graves asked. "Why reactivate GhostNet after 40 years?" "Because the people who ordered the shutdown are dying," Architect said. "Natural causes, old age, cancer. They're in their 80s and 90s now. In a few years they'll all be gone completely, and with them any possibility of accountability for what they did." He stood up, walked to the window, looked out into darkness. "I'm 78 years old. Most of the people in this room are in their 60s and 70s. We don't have much time left either. If we're going to tell the truth, if we're going to get recognition for what we did and what was done to us, it has to be now. This is our last chance." "Recognition," Graves repeated. "You mean going fully public?" "Congressional hearing," Architect said. "Full testimony, complete documentation, proof that GhostNet existed, proof that we served our country, proof that we were systematically erased for political convenience." One of the other operators spoke up, a woman, 60-something. "That's suicide. They'll destroy all of us." "They'll try," Architect agreed. "But we have something they don't have. We have credible witnesses." He gestured to Marcus. "Richard Webb's nephew, civilian. No connection whatsoever to the intelligence community. He found the frequencies independently. He has documentation his uncle left specifically for him. His testimony will carry enormous weight because he has no agenda except truth. Marcus stood up. I didn't agree to any of this. You did when you walked out of your shop this morning, Architect said. You did when you chose to come here. You did when you decided the truth mattered more than personal safety. I don't know anything, Marcus protested. I fix radios. I'm not a whistleblower. I'm not qualified for this. You know what you heard, Architect said. You know what you saw. You know what your uncle documented carefully. That's more than enough. That's everything we need. Graves put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You don't have to do this. You can walk away right now. But if you do, everything your uncle worked for dies permanently with him. Marcus looked around the room. At 15 elderly people who had spent 40 years in hiding, who had served their country in ways nobody could officially acknowledge, who had been erased by the same government they had protected. What exactly do I have to do? He asked. Architect smiled. Tell your story honestly. Show the documentation. Be completely truthful. The rest will follow naturally. They spent the next full week at the facility preparing. Architect had lawyers, former military lawyers, sympathetic to the cause. They drafted formal testimony, organized evidence systematically, built a comprehensive case that GhostNet had existed and its operators deserved official recognition. Marcus learned more about his uncle, about the man behind the electronics shop, the man who had maintained critical radio equipment for covert operations, who had risked everything to document the truth, who had died, possibly murdered, protecting that truth. Graves became something like a mentor, taught Marcus about operational security, about how to recognize surveillance, about how to stay safe when powerful people wanted you permanently silent. On the 7th day, Architect called everyone together for a meeting. The Congressional Committee has agreed to hear our testimony, classified session, limited attendance, but it's officially on the record. That's what matters most. When? Graves asked. 3 weeks from today, Washington, D.C. We'll all testify. Operators, civilian witnesses, complete documentation, full disclosure of everything. And after? Someone asked quietly. After, Architect said, we wait and see if the truth is enough. 3 weeks passed like water through fingers. Marcus closed his shop, left a handwritten note on the door. Family emergency, closed indefinitely. Sorry for any inconvenience. He flew to Washington, D.C. with Graves and Architect, met the other operators at a discreet hotel near Capitol Hill. They looked like completely normal people, elderly, unremarkable, the kind you'd pass on the street without a second glance. But they moved differently, observed differently, carried themselves with awareness that came from decades of operating in hostile environments where mistakes meant death. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. They arrived early, went through multiple layers of security screening, were escorted to a secure conference room in the basement of a congressional office building. No windows, no phones allowed inside, maximum security protocols. The committee consisted of 5 members, 3 men, 2 women, all senior legislators, all with intelligence oversight responsibilities. They looked deeply skeptical. Marcus testified first. He told them about the radio, the frequency card, the transmission he'd heard, his uncle's documentation. He showed them the actual records, the photographs, the logbooks, the letter his uncle had written specifically for him. He spoke for 40 minutes without interruption. When he finished, one of the committee members leaned forward. Mr. Webb, are you aware that what you're describing would implicate active intelligence operations if true? I'm aware it implicates intelligence operations from 40 years ago, Marcus replied carefully. Operations that were never officially sanctioned, never officially recorded, never officially acknowledged by anyone in authority. And you expect us to believe this actually existed? I expect you to examine the evidence objectively, Marcus said, and make your own determination based on facts. Next, the operators testified. One by one, they stated their call signs, their service dates, their operational areas. They described specific missions, intelligence gathered, operations successfully coordinated, lives saved. Some showed old scars, evidence of injuries sustained in the field. Some showed photographs, younger versions of themselves standing beside radio equipment in jungle clearings, in desert compounds, in mountain hideouts. Architect testified last. He spoke for 2 full hours, detailed the entire history of GhostNet from conception to shutdown, how it was conceived, how it operated, how it was systematically dismantled, how operators were eliminated. He named specific names, officials who knew about GhostNet, officials who ordered the shutdown, officials who might have ordered the elimination of operators who knew too much. The committee listened in tense silence. Some took extensive notes. Some looked increasingly uncomfortable as the testimony continued. When Architect finally finished, the committee chair spoke carefully. "This is extraordinary testimony. If independently verified, it represents a significant and deeply troubling breach of congressional oversight. Operations conducted without proper authorization. Personnel placed in extreme danger without accountability. Deaths that may have been deliberately covered up." "It's all completely true," Architect said. "Every single word." The chair looked at the other committee members. Some unspoken communication passed between them in glances and subtle gestures. "We'll need to review all the evidence thoroughly, conduct independent verification through classified channels. This will take considerable time." "We understand completely," Architect said. "But we want it officially on the record, today, right now, that we testified, that we provided extensive evidence, that we told the truth publicly." The chair nodded slowly. "It will be recorded, classified recording, but officially recorded in congressional records." The hearing ended. They left the building together, walked out into bright Washington, D.C. sunlight. Nobody spoke for several minutes. They stood on the sidewalk together, 15 elderly operators, 1 civilian witness, 1 man who'd been officially dead for 40 years. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "We wait," Architect said, "and hope the truth is finally enough." 2 weeks later, the Department of Defense issued an official press release, brief, clinical, bureaucratic. The department acknowledges the existence of a limited signals intelligence program operating between 1972 and 1982. Personnel records are currently being reviewed for possible recognition. Further details remain classified indefinitely. That was it. 62 words, but it was official acknowledgement, proof, validation. Marcus returned to Portland, reopened his shop. But everything felt different now. The radios on his wall weren't just collectibles anymore, they were history, real history. Tools that had been used by people who didn't officially exist, to do things nobody could officially acknowledge. Graves visited once a month. They'd have coffee together, talk about frequencies, about signals, about the past, about people who mattered. 6 months after the congressional hearing, Marcus received a package, no return address, anonymous. Inside was a medal, Intelligence Star, awarded posthumously to his uncle, for exceptional service in support of classified operations. No details, no elaboration, just recognition. Marcus mounted it on the wall beside the vintage radios, above his uncle's photograph, evidence that some truths survive, that some people refuse to stay erased, that some stories demand to be told regardless of the cost. The scanner on his counter continued cycling through frequencies, public safety, marine band, aviation. And sometimes, late at night when the shop was closed, Marcus would hear something else, a voice, a call sign, a transmission on a frequency that officially didn't exist in any database. GhostNet was officially gone, shut down, erased. But the ghosts remained, watching, listening, remembering. And in a small electronics shop in Portland, 1 civilian witness kept their story alive, 1 frequency at a time. The months that followed the congressional hearing brought changes Marcus never could have predicted. His shop became something different, not just a place to fix broken radios and replace phone chargers. It became a repository, a memorial, a living archive of things that officially never happened. Customers would come in and notice the medal on the wall, the Intelligence Star with his uncle's name engraved on it, They'd ask questions. Marcus would tell them what he could, what had been declassified, what was now public record, what his uncle had died protecting. Some customers didn't believe him, thought it was all conspiracy nonsense. Marcus didn't argue with them. He'd learned that some people would never accept the truth no matter how much evidence you showed them. But others listened, really listened. And they'd leave the shop understanding that history is more complicated than official records suggest. That brave people have always operated in the shadows. That some sacrifices go unrecognized for decades. Graves visited on the third Thursday of every month. Always at 2 p.m., always carrying a thermos of coffee. They'd sit in the back office and talk about frequencies, about the old equipment, about the people who'd used it. Architect passed away last month, Graves said during one visit, peacefully, in his sleep. He was 80 years old. Marcus set down the radio component he'd been examining. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be, Graves said. He got to tell his story. He got to see GhostNet acknowledged officially. He got to watch us receive recognition. That's more than most operators ever got. He died satisfied. How many are left now? 13. We're old. We're dying. That's just reality. But we lasted long enough to tell the truth. That's what matters. Marcus poured coffee from Graves's thermos. Do you regret any of it? The operations? The secrecy? The 40 years in hiding? Graves was quiet for a long moment. I regret that it had to be secret. I regret the operators who died before they could be acknowledged. I regret the families who were lied to, but the work itself, no. We saved lives. We gathered intelligence that prevented wars. We did good work in bad circumstances. I'm proud of that. 3 months later, Marcus received a phone call. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then something made him pick up. Mr. Webb, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from the National Cryptologic Museum. We're planning an exhibit about Cold War signals intelligence. We'd like to include information about GhostNet and your uncle's contributions. Would you be willing to loan us some of his documentation? Marcus looked at the locked cabinet in the corner, at the evidence his uncle had risked everything to preserve. What kind of exhibit? A permanent installation. Voices in the dark, the hidden history of GhostNet. We want to honor the operators, tell their stories properly for the first time. Your uncle's records are the most complete documentation we've found anywhere. I'll need to think about it. Of course, take all the time you need, but Mr. Webb, this is important. These people deserve to be remembered. Your uncle deserves to be remembered. Marcus thought about it for a week. Then he called Graves. The Cryptologic Museum wants to do an exhibit about GhostNet. They want Uncle Richard's documentation. What do you think? I think your uncle would be honored, Graves said. I think he'd want people to know the truth. That's why he kept the records in the first place. You're sure? I'm sure. Give them the documentation. Let them tell the story properly. It's time. 6 months later, Marcus attended the exhibit opening at the National Cryptologic Museum in Maryland. Graves came with him. So did 8 of the surviving GhostNet operators, old men and women now, gray hair and walking canes and bodies worn down by age and hard use. The exhibit was exactly what they'd promised: professional, respectful, comprehensive. Display cases showing actual equipment from the era, photographs of operators, faces finally revealed after decades of enforced anonymity, maps showing relay stations across 4 continents. Mission logs with classified details carefully redacted, but enough shown to convey the scope and importance of the work. And in the center of the exhibit, behind protective glass, his uncle's logbook, open to the page dated April 17, 1979. The frequency circled in red ink, the words GhostNet written beside it, physical proof that this had all been real. A placard beside the logbook read, Richard Webb, 1952-2023, civilian contractor and technical specialist, maintained communication equipment for classified operations, documented GhostNet history at great personal risk, awarded Intelligence Star posthumously for exceptional service. Marcus stood looking at it for a long time. Graves stood beside him silently. He'd be proud, Graves finally said quietly. I hope so, Marcus replied. The museum director approached them. Mr. Webb, we'd like you to say a few words at the dedication ceremony, if you're comfortable with that. Marcus looked at Graves. Graves nodded slightly. What would you want me to say? Whatever feels right to you. Whatever you think your uncle would want people to know. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood at a podium in front of 50 people, museum staff, reporters, historians, intelligence community veterans, and the 8 surviving GhostNet operators sitting in the front row. He'd never given a public speech before. His hands were shaking, his voice cracked slightly when he started. My uncle, Richard Webb, ran a small electronics repair shop in Portland for 30 years. To most people, he was just a guy who fixed radios and sold used equipment. But he was more than that, much more. Marcus looked down at his notes, then decided to ignore them. He was part of something that officially never existed. He maintained equipment for operators who officially didn't exist. He documented a network that was officially erased from history. And he did all of that knowing it put him in danger, knowing that powerful people wanted those secrets buried forever. He gestured toward the exhibit. These aren't just old radios and dusty documents. This is proof that brave people operated in the shadows for decades, that they made sacrifices we're only now beginning to understand, that they deserved recognition 40 years ago but are finally getting it today. He looked directly at the 8 operators sitting in the front row. My uncle left me a letter. In it, he said, don't let them erase what we did. I'm honoring that request today. We're all honoring it. By remembering, by acknowledging, by refusing to let the truth stay buried. He stepped away from the podium. The room was completely silent for 3 seconds. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping. The 8 operators stood slowly, not applauding, just standing, bearing witness. After the ceremony, one of the museum visitors approached Marcus. Elderly woman, 70-something, moved with careful precision. Mr. Webb, my name is Dorothy Carlson. My husband was an operator. Call sign Delta 7. He died in 1984. Car accident, they said. I never quite believed that. Marcus remembered the call sign. Delta 7. The first transmission he'd heard on his scanner that morning months ago. I'm very sorry for your loss. Don't be sorry, she said. Just don't forget him. Don't forget any of them. That's all I ask. I won't. I promise. She smiled, patted his hand, walked away. Marcus returned to Portland the next day, reopened his shop, back to the routine of repairing electronics and selling vintage equipment. But everything was different now. The scanner still sat on the counter, cycling through frequencies. But now when Marcus heard unusual transmissions, he didn't dismiss them. He wrote them down, checked them against his uncle's logs, sometimes found matches, sometimes didn't. The locked cabinet wasn't locked anymore. He'd given most of the documentation to the museum. What remained was available for researchers, for historians, for anyone legitimately interested in the truth. And people came. Graduate students writing dissertations about Cold War intelligence operations, journalists working on investigative pieces, former intelligence community members who wanted to verify their own memories against documented history. Marcus helped them all, shared what he knew, connected them with surviving operators when possible, became in his own small way a guardian of history that almost disappeared. One evening, 2 years after the congressional hearing, Marcus was closing up the shop when his phone rang. Unknown number again. He answered. Is this Marcus Webb? Male voice, older, unfamiliar. Speaking. My name is Colonel James Morrison, retired. I served in Army intelligence during the Cold War. I read about the GhostNet exhibit. I think I might have information that could help fill in some gaps in the historical record. What kind of information? I was stationed in Thailand in 1977. We had a civilian contractor who maintained communication equipment for classified operations. His name was Richard Webb. I think he was your uncle. Marcus sat down slowly. Yes, that was him. He saved my life, Morrison said quietly. Our communications went down during an operation. Complete failure. We were cut off, surrounded, no way to call for support. Your uncle drove 6 hours through hostile territory to bring us replacement equipment. Fixed our radios under fire. We made it out because of him." "I never knew that," Marcus said. "Nobody did. It was classified. I'm only telling you now because he's gone and the operation has been partially declassified. But I wanted you to know. Your uncle was a hero. Not officially, maybe. But to the 8 men on my team who made it home that night, he was absolutely a hero. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for making sure he's remembered." The line went dead. Marcus sat in the quiet shop for a long time. Outside, Portland evening traffic hummed past. The scanner cycled through familiar frequencies. The vintage radios on the wall gleamed under the overhead lights. His phone buzzed, text message from Graves. "Lighthouse 6 passed away yesterday. 12 of us left now. Time catches all of us eventually." Marcus typed back. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We lasted long enough to tell the truth. That's victory enough." Marcus stood up, walked to the wall where his uncle's medal hung. The intelligent star gleamed in the light. Below it, a new photograph. The 8 surviving operators at the museum dedication, standing together one more time. Soon there would be 7, then 6, then eventually none. But their story would survive. The documentation existed now. The exhibit was permanent. The truth was on the record. They couldn't be erased anymore. Marcus locked the shop door, flipped the sign to closed, walked to his truck. Tomorrow he'd open the shop again, fix more radios, help more customers, continue the routine. But he'd do it knowing that his work meant something more now. That every vintage radio he restored was a connection to history. That every frequency he checked was honoring the operators who'd used those frequencies when it mattered most. He drove home through the Portland evening, the city lights reflecting off low clouds, radio playing quiet jazz, life continuing normally for everyone except the few who knew the truth. And somewhere, on frequencies nobody was officially monitoring anymore, the ghosts of GhostNet still transmitted, still watching, still listening, still refusing to be completely erased, because some truths are too important to stay buried forever. Some sacrifices demand recognition eventually. Some voices refuse to be silenced, no matter how many years pass. Marcus understood that now. His uncle had understood it 40 years ago. That's why he'd documented everything, why he'd created insurance, why he'd written that final letter. "Don't let them erase what we did." Marcus hadn't, wouldn't, never would. The story would continue. The truth would survive. The ghosts would be remembered. One frequency at a time.